For the end of Cannabis Book Week, let's do a 5-minute speed run of all of my favorite cannabis books. If you've read any of these, or if I missed any, let me know in the comments. And let's see if you are in the 3% and you get to the end of this video. I'm Lex Pelger. I do Canna Education for CV Sciences, the makers of Plus CBD, who has excellent CBD and THC products and believes in the value of education. I'll be doing these in roughly chronological order. I don't need to talk about cannabis evolution ethnobotany, I've done enough videos on that, but for a great collection of all the different drug writings throughout human history, Artificial Paradises by Mike J. is a really great collection. Also, for overall history, Abel's Marijuana, the First 12,000 Years, is a classic, and it's actually free online as well, druglibrary.net. Also fun is Abel's Marijuana Dictionary, and this is just a whole bunch of archaic terms from all over history for reefer, and I use it all the time in my writings. Another history of writers on drug is The Road of Excess by Boone. This is quite good on the cultural thinking around it. I've mentioned this before, An Ancient Egyptian Herbal by Lisa Manich. This is the book on plants in ancient Egypt, and it mentions hemp cannabis quite a bit. Then, in the history, I really like Chris Bennett as a historian. He is an obsessive, and I like obsessives. So this is him saying that the soma of ancient India was cannabis. Nobody can really know that for sure, but his history is worth reading, and he makes a really good case for this. Also, this is even more insightful, and no one else has hardly written on it. Liber 420. This is a history of cannabis and alchemy. And cannabis was used a lot in that. It just wasn't talked about much because it was always written about in different kinds of codes. So this is a really fat, well-done nonfiction book. Also, his first book on that was Green Gold, The Tree of Life, Marijuana, Magic, and Religion for a more overall view. For the history in Islam, Tripping with Allah is by this kind of gonzo journalist, Michael Muhammad Knight, and he talks about the Sufis and cannabis as well as the more traditional Islamic take on cannabis. Really an excellent, out there kind of book. Then, here are 3 classics that I love, each for a different reason. This is Llewellyn Lewin's Fantastica. This is one of the first popular books ever about drugs, and his stuff that he writes about cannabis is quite interesting. This is Plant Intoxicants by Von Bibra. I also like him. He kind of stole from Lewin, though, and didn't really tell anybody, which I don't love. And then the best written of all of these is my favorite, The 7 Sisters of Sleep by Mordecai Cubitt Cook, because the 7 Sisters of Sleep are the 7 major plant drugs. So he's this very poetic writer about drugs, but he's also like a British civil servant type who just collects all of this data from the empire about how people are using drugs. Really, one of the best things ever written on drugs before 1900. Also, one of the most important first things is Moreau's Hashish and Mental Illness. This is the first thing ever written in the West about the psychoactive effects of cannabis, and Moreau started giving it to other French intellectuals and started the Club des Hashishans, which actually, that's the next book. One of the books about the Club of Hashishin is Peter Hanning's The Hashish Club, for all of those great French writers, which I've barely talked about on here. I did a video about this yesterday, but I do love Fitzhugh Ludlow and his Hashish Eater. It's the best drug book ever written, and the first drug book ever written in the history of the United States. I also mentioned Isabel Eberhardt in our female drug writers. The Oblivion Seekers is a really cool book, and it's translated by Paul Bowles as well, which is, he's a good translator. So this is this, proto-hippie before around 1900 or so, running around North Africa, smoking hashish, speaking the language. Very cool woman. And then Isaac Campo's Homegrown, he also has a Substack, you can follow him. This is about Mexico and cannabis there. Then this is an excellent everything going on in the 19th century. Emperor of Dreams, Drugs of the 19th Century, and Mike J. Mike J is a great historian on this cannabis stuff. Don't need that one. This is Cannabis in France by David A. Gupa, Taming Cannabis. Also, The Age of Intoxication by Breen is good. And then this is a very cool book, The Dope Chronicles, edited by Gary Silver, with text by Michael Aldrich. Michael Aldrich was the first person to ever get a cannabis PhD in the United States. He's considered the archivist of the movement. This is just images and stuff from newspapers, and it is a wonderful collection. I use this all the time in my graphic novel work. So, down to this one, Underworld of the East by James S. Lee. This is this British guy, I think, and he went to the Far East for a lot of years. So this is a lot about doing opium and hashish in the Far East before anyone else was really talking about that. Another one like that is Henry de Monofreid's Hashish, A Smuggler's Tale. So he was an early hashish smuggler. And so this is a really fun adventure story as well. Then, Oscar A. Schmidt's Hashish. This is a very weirdly written, like Eastern European kind of book, but I really enjoyed it a lot. It's good illustrations, too. Roll Away the Stone. This is by Israel Regarde, who is one of the great historians of magic and the occult. And this is somewhat about Aleister Crowley and his take on cannabis and hashish, which was quite insightful. And then Harry Shapiro. This is on Waiting for the Man, the Story of Drugs and Popular Music. If you want to know about cannabis and the popular music scene, this is a great modern history. Very helpful stuff. And this one goes a little bit far back. Marijuana Medical Papers, assembled by Dr. Todd Mikaria. He was the physician behind the California medical cannabis law. And so he collected all of this important medical writings from after the Civil War up until the 70s. And all the stuff you read in here is as accurate than it is now. Really, really wonderful stuff. Can't Find My Way. This is a good history of drugs and cannabis in the 1945 to 2000 by Martin Togroff. This is for the scientist people. Roger Adams' Scientist and Statement. This is the guy who figured out the structure of CBN. My second graphic novel, The Crown, which is available as a free PDF on my website, and I'm still working on getting it up for resale on Amazon, but it's completely about that discovery of CBN. This is more drugs. Here are some of the pulp novels. Musk, Hashish, and Blood by Hector France. I mean, it's those kind of books. Marijuana Girl by N.R.D. Mexico. They're exactly what you would think. The Marijuana Papers by Solomon and Linda Smith. This is called one of the first 3 great things ever written on cannabis to really help break things open and the thinking around this. The other is this one, Marijuana Reconsidered by Dr. Lester Grinspoon, and his son, Peter Grinspoon, is still active and a great person to follow. But this was written by a doctor at NIDA who was tasked for looking at the harms of cannabis and realizing he couldn't find any. Then his kid got cancer and he realized that the only thing that helped with the chemo was cannabis. And so he became one of the first great doctors to say, no, we need to rethink this drug. One of the most important books ever done. The last one is The Children's Garden of Grass, or you could argue it was the beat writer, the poet. The beat poet Allen Ginsberg wrote the Great Marijuana Hoax and really helped to blow this thing open as well. Bloomquist's Marijuana. If you remember that scene in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where the person was talking all this stupid nonsense about drugs, this is based on Bloomquist. Same with Parents, Peers, and Pot, this NIDA thing that I have. But a great one on cannabis is Thomas Pynchon's Inherent Vice. This is California and cannabis, and it's just really a well-written book. Oh, I do have a copy of Children's Garden of Grass. This is actually very lucky. This book is actually worth a lot of money, and I happen to get a copy of it. And then the last one I wanted to share is Mila Hansen, How I Became the Hash Queen. I did an interview of her years ago, and she was the great hash queen who invented some new technologies about how to separate hash using just a drying machine. She still lives in Amsterdam, and this is her book about her life. Oh, and you can't talk about drug books without talking about Infinite Jest. Whatever you think of David Foster Wallace, this is one of the best depictions of what cannabis addiction can look like. And I did actually enjoy this book, but the cannabis stuff is really important. So let me know if you know any of those books, if you have others that I should add to my list, and thank you for getting to the end of this speed run of cannabis books.